Howdy all, Brian S. Pratt here. So I'm going to read chapter 2. I'm doing it Saturday afternoon instead of Sunday morning because I may not be up early on Sunday morning if I'm at my girlfriend's. However, that may not happen. Between me and her is a severe series of storms, strong storms, that's going to dump large-sized hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. They're saying it's almost guaranteed that's going to happen. And I really don't want to be out in the middle of that. But it's only the last 20 minutes of my drive too. Just 20. If it could have held off 20 more minutes, I could make it. But I'm gonna be right in the middle of it, and that just may not be what I want to do. I may have to postpone it. So I'm doing it now because in a couple hours I'll check the weather report before, and if it looks good, I'll head out. If not, then I'm gonna postpone it. But I'm gonna do it now anyway. I'll be ahead. So, chapter 2. Oh, on a side note, every time I start this, I got my laptop here, and I'm reading this off the laptop and making changes to the manuscript. But every time I'm about ready to start my phone, I grab my mouse, look at my phone, and I try to, and for about 5 seconds, I'm moving my mouse, trying to find the cursor to click the little button on the phone, which of course doesn't work. So, I don't know why I said that. Anyway, here's chapter 2 of Shepherd's Quest. So basically, we got Chadric and Riyan so far. Riyan being the shepherd, and Chadric being the miller's son. And they were out watching some sheep. And of course, Riyan has that one that they call Blackface, who gets into all kinds of trouble, who always strays and is the biggest hitch in their get along. So, all right, chapter 2. Here we go. Later that day, when the sun began its trek to the horizon, Riyan and Chad gathered the flock and started the return journey home. It wasn't safe for the herd to be left out in the hills at night. Aside from wild animals, there was always a chance that goblins might be in the area and would help themselves. The village of Quillim, which both lads called home, called past tense, thank you, sat on the border where the lands of Duke York abutted that of the mountains whose other side marked the beginning of the goblin territories. When I first wrote this, I had a big problem with present tense, past tense, and so reading it now, I find a lot of present tense still in these books. So I'm going to ultimately have to go through every single one of these because it's starting to really bug me. Peace between the two races had lasted for over a century, ever since the goblins were pushed back across the mountains during the War of the Three Clans. Now it's only the occasional raid here and there by goblins that worry the people in Quillim. Those living in the area found that if you kept your flock in close to your home at night, there was less chance one would turn up missing in the morning. My father has me helping at the mill tomorrow, Chad informed his friend. Seems my brother is down in Wardeen on business. Oh, asked Riyan, what takes him down there? A friend of father has a mill there and may be interested in apprenticing Ty, he said. Father's friend wants Ty to stay a week so he may see what kind of person he is. If he gets apprenticed, won't that mean you'll have to help your father more? Riyan asked. Chad sighed. Unfortunately, yes. As long as Ty helped with the mill, he didn't need me. My whole family knows my dissatisfaction with being the life of a miller, and they are okay with me pursuing another trade. But if Ty gets apprenticed, there will be no one to help out, at least not for a few years until Errol gets a little older. Tough break, said Riyan, with a pat on his friend's back. If I had settled on a trade by now, Chad told his friend, I wouldn't be in this mess. Just then, from up ahead, 4 young men who were a little bit older than Riyan and Chad appeared over the crest of the hill. Great, complained Riyan. When Chad spied who was headed their way, he too gave out with a groan. Well, 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 one of the approaching young men began to say as the two groups came together. I thought I smelled the foul odor of sheep dung. Only 2 years older than Riyan and Chad, The one who spoke had been a thorn in their sides all their lives. Being the son of Quillim's magistrate, not to mention the fact that his family had held title to most of the lands the local shepherds used to graze their flock, had given him the idea he's better than everyone else. His father was a nice enough person, but the son was a right nasty piece of work. "Good evening, Rupert," Riyan said. "Didn't I tell you not to use this area for your stinking sheep?" Rupert asked. "We pay your father for the use of this land," argued Riyan. "He's the only one who can tell us not to use it." "Sounds pretty uppity for a sheep dung boy," one of Rupert's cronies said. "I don't care what you think you can and can't do, sheep dung boy," Rupert asserted with a scowl. "You aren't to use this area." He moved to stand in front of Riyan and poked him hard in the chest with his finger. "Do you understand me?" When Riyan failed to respond quickly, Rupert slapped him across the face. "I asked you a question." "I understand you all too well," replied Riyan. Face beginning to turn red, he stared at Rupert with undisguised hatred. "Scatter 'em, boys," he said to his cronies. The three young men with Rupert set to waving arms and hollering to scare off the sheep. "Maybe this will help you to remember." Then he too started yelling and waving his arms to scatter Ryan's flock. Riyan and Chad stood there in the road and did nothing. They had long ago learned that if they tried to stop Rupert and his friends, that things would only get worse. So they did nothing and waited for them to stop. When at last Rupert and his cronies ceased chasing Ryan's sheep, they laughed and continued along their way. "I hate him," Riyan said with a great feeling. "I know," replied Chad. "Everyone does. I don't know how a nice man like his father could spawn such a person." From the surrounding area, the sound of bleating sheep rang out. "We better go find them before the sun goes down," Riyan said. While the sun sank toward the horizon, Riyan and Chad combed the neighboring hills until all the sheep were accounted for. Then they resumed their way to Ryan's home. It was a small house with only 3 rooms, one for his mother, one for himself, and the outer living area. His father had died several years ago while out watching the flock. One of the mountain spiders had attacked and bit him. The venom quickly worked through his system, and before he could return, had passed into unconsciousness. He was dead when they found him the next day. Riyan still blamed himself for his father's death. Had he been with his father that day, he could have gone to old Glia for one of her potions, which would have cured the poison coursing through his father's veins. Instead, he and Chad had gone fishing. Mountain spiders, such as what attacked his father, were rare in these parts. At most, they were sighted once or twice a year. In the last 5 years, his father had been the only one to have encountered one. "We better hurry, or my mother will be getting worried," said Riyan. With Chad's help, they herded the flock along the trail leading to Ryan's house. By the time Ryan's home came into view, stars were already beginning to appear. Chad helped him get the flock into the fenced area where they spent the night. Then he said, "I better hurry along too, or my father will get on me again about not being home on time." Riyan patted him on the back and said, "Thanks for the help." "You're welcome," he replied. "Don't know when I'll be able to join you in the hills again. With Ty gone for a week, I'll be stuck at the mill." Riyan shrugged. "What is, must be," he waxed poetically. "Next time it'll be your turn to tell a tale." "Already figured out how I'm going to kill you off," he replied with a grin. Laughing, Riyan gave him another good-natured slap on the back. "Can't wait." Chad hurried home. Riyan turned toward the door just as it opened to reveal his mother. "Everything okay?" she asked, worried. "Rupert again," he explained. "I'm going to talk to his father in the morning," she said as she stepped aside to let him enter. "He has no right to do such things. We pay them good money to graze our flock on their land. We should not be treated in such a manner." Riyan went to the table and sat down. "It'll do no good," he said. "The last time you went to his father after something like this, all that happened was that I got a beating the next day." He reached out for the ladle in the stew pot and filled his bowl. His mother sat across from him and looked at her son with sad eyes. She wanted something better for him than a life as a shepherd, especially one around here. It wasn't so bad before Rupert grew to adulthood, but now things for her son were not so good. But there was little hope of improving their lot in life. He can't do anything serious," he said to his mother between bites. "If he does, then his father would be forced to intervene. He'll not risk that." Throughout the rest of the meal, they talked about more inconsequential things in an attempt to put Rupert out of their minds. Afterward, Riyan headed off to bed, as he must be up with the dawn to once again shepherd the flock. The following morning, he was up well before the sun crested the eastern horizon. The place where he planned to take the flock to graze was deeper within. I don't think so. Was deeper within the hills than where he had taken them yesterday. But as his father taught him, if the sheep were allowed to graze too long in one place, it would eventually ruin the area for grazing. His father once related an experience he had while a young man. He was just learning the art of shepherding and had allowed his flock to graze one area for several weeks in succession. Such constant grazing had left the area unusable for many weeks. So now Riyan always made sure that he rotated the flock between the various pastures among the hills. Now, I've never grazed sheep, but I know around here the farmers, ranchers. You don't ever call a rancher a farmer around here, or they'll explain to you in great detail, vehemently, why they are not farmers. They are ranchers. Well, anyway, so the ranchers around here, they rotate. They have cattle. So, and they have multiple fields, and so they rotate them from field to field to field to allow the ground to, grass to grow and to so forth. Also, it spreads their dung, their cow patties around to help fertilize the different fields too, which helps. It took him well over an hour to bring the flock to the desired pasture. Nestled in among the hills, such as it was, it had always been one of Riyan's favorite places to take them. The quiet and tranquility of this area of the hills was accentuated by a stream that worked its way from one end to the other. Once the flock was where he wanted, gotta get rid of an extra word, he made himself uncomfortable under a tree while he kept an eye on them. Off to the west rose the mountains that separated these lands from that of the goblins. He often wondered what they looked like. Oh, sure, he'd heard tales of them all his life. Supposedly they were about half to 2/3 the size of the average human, with a slight greenish hue to their skin. But he'd never seen one, and always wanted to. Though from a distance, as they're reputed to be rather antisocial creatures and prone to attacking anything that came near. The day went by as every other day of his life had, boring and dull. Most of his time was spent simply doing nothing but sitting and watching the flock. Other times he took out his sling and pretended that he was a fighter in one of the stories he and Chad told one another. He would run around the hill and kill enemies with stones slung from his sling. Of course, the plethora of enemies he killed were in actuality small plants, trees, and the occasional rock. His aim had improved greatly over the years. Even at a run, he could hit his target more often than not. He always carried a staff with him as well as his sling while out watching his flock. There had been times over the years when between his staff and sling, he had been able to fight off predators that had tried that had tried to make off with one of his sheep. When not spending time killing monsters with his sling, he worked on his staff. He'd become pretty decent at twirling it, but not so good that it hummed when it spun. In the stories the bards always told, the great staffers could cause their staves to hum. There were times when he believed some of the tales the bards told were a bit over-exaggerated. Yeah. Bah! Now what, he asked himself. He had been dozing under the tree, basking in the warmth of the morning sun. Looking over the flock, he tried to ascertain which one of them was bleeding. Blackface, the troublemaker, was nowhere to be seen. Of course. Leaving his staff to lean. So I had it leaving his staff to leaning against, but no. I changed it to leaving his staff to lean against the tree. He got to his feet and followed the sound of the bleeding. Sometimes a small change in words makes it sound so much better. The sound came from over the far side of a nearby hill. He walked quickly toward it, dreaming of the time when they would sell off some of the flock. He was going to make sure that Blackface was one of the ones to go. He hurried up the side of the hill, and when he crested it, looked down the other side. "Blackface!" he cried out as he took his sling from the belt. Blackface again cried out in fear as one of the predators of the mountains circled it. A small animal, barely half Blackface's size, yet with a strong jaw and sharp teeth, they were a constant threat in these parts. Riyan placed a stone within the cup of the sling and quickly got it up to speed. Then he launched it at the animal just as it ready to attack. The stone flew straight and true toward the small, dog-like creature and struck it in the side of the head. The blow sent it reeling to the side before the small dog collapsed. He raced down the hill, and when he reached Blackface, shooed the sheep back up toward the rest of the flock. Then he returned his attention to the predator and saw that it still breathed. Riyan stepped closer, pulled out his knife. With a quick strike, he killed it. Quillim City Council had posted a 2 silver piece bounty on the animal due to the menace it posed to the community. Many sheep had been lost to them over the years. Riyan picked the animal up by the scruff of the neck and carried it back to where he'd been keeping watch over the flock. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, and when he returned with the flock later that night, showed the dead animal to his mother. I'm going to go in early tomorrow and collect the bounty, he said. Then I'll take the flock out in the afternoon. His mother took the carcass and cut the animal's head off. That was all that was required by the council in order to receive the bounty. The rest of it she dressed and began to prepare for next evening's dinner. The following morning, an hour or so after they finished their morning meal, Riyan walked into town with the sack containing the animal's head. Quillim wasn't much of a town. It had the essentials required of every town: a chandler's shop, baker, butcher, etc. All the places the neighboring townsfolk needed in order to survive. The building housing the magistrate's office and the council's meeting hall sat prominently in the center of town. It was to this building that Riyan took the animal's head. He slowed down when he saw the three young men who were Rupert's cronies talking with one another near the town hall's front entrance. When they noticed Riyan approaching, they grew quiet and turned toward him. Just then, Freya and her father exited the building through the front door. "Freya!" he exclaimed quite happily. He and Freya had been friends for as long as either could remember. In his heart, he had always cared deeply for her and even had thoughts that they may one day be married. His mood quickly sobered when she failed to meet his eyes. Her father nodded his head in greeting and gave him a curt "Riyan." Then they brushed past him without speaking. He turned to look at them as they left, and Freya glanced over her shoulder back to him. Their eyes locked for a brief second before she broke the contact and turned her head forward once more. He came to a stop as he watched her leave, puzzled by her reaction. Usually, she was quite excited to see him. After all, with him out in the fields with the sheep most of the time, there was little opportunity for them to spend any time together. "What's the matter?" one of Rupert's friends asked as the three came and surrounded him. "Maybe she doesn't like him anymore," another one quipped. "Could be she found a better man, one that doesn't smell like sheep dung," the third one said. At that, he and the others started laughing derisively. Riyan ignored their taunts as he knew that to respond in any way would only egg them on. He tried to continue toward the town hall's entrance, but was blocked when the first one stepped in front of him and put his hand on Ryan's chest. His eyes went down to look at the sack Riyan held in his hand. "What do you have there?" "Nothing you'd be interested in," replied Riyan. "Oh yeah?" asked another. Then he snatched it out of Ryan's hand. "Give it back," demanded Riyan. Holding the sack before him, the young man asked, "Or what?" Before Riyan had the chance to reply, Rupert and his father, the magistrate, exited the building. The magistrate quickly grasped what was going on by the way the three young men had Riyan surrounded and how the one young man was holding the sack out before him. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The three young men turned toward him quickly, startled by his sudden appearance. Nothing." Riyan turned to face the magistrate and said, "I killed the Kai dog. I was bringing it to collect the bounty when they took the sack containing its head from me." The magistrate's face darkened as he turned to face the one holding the sack. "Was nothing like that, Your Honor," the young man explained. "Just having a little fun is all." "Give it back, Gurg," the magistrate ordered. "Sure thing," Gurg replied. Then he handed the sack back to Riyan. "Here you go." Riyan snatched the sack out of his hand and then said to the magistrate, "Thank you." "You're welcome, my boy," he replied to Riyan. "Go inside and Cece will take care of it for you." Riyan nodded, and as the young man stepped out of his way, he walked toward the door. Behind him, he heard the magistrate begin to berate his son about the conduct of his friends. Riyan doubted it would do any good. More than likely, it would cause him to get a beating the next time he and Rupert met. He walked through the entrance, and they entered the first door on his right. Within, he found Cece, the lady who looked after the town hall as well as paid for bounties and performed various other duties. She looked up from her desk and saw him standing just within the doorway. From the blood stains on the sack, she knew why he was there. He held up the sack and said, "Bagged a Kai dog yesterday." She motioned for him to come forward and then took the sack from him when he offered it to her. Open it, she looked in at the severed Kai dog head and then nodded. She set the sack on the floor behind her and then opened a strong box that was resting on the floor next to her desk. After removing 2 silver pieces, she handed them over to him. "Good work, Riyan," she praised. "Thank you." "Thank you," he replied as he took the coins. "Did you hear?" she asked with a smile. "I haven't been in town lately," he explained. "Something going on?" "Oh, yes," she replied. "Rupert and Freya are to be married." "What?" he exclaimed loudly. "Sometime last night, Rupert asked her father for her hand, and he said yes," she explained. Then she saw the look in his eyes and realized something was amiss. "Are you okay?" Dazed, his mind numb and heart breaking, Riyan paid her question no heed. Instead, he turned around and rushed from the building. Once outside, he searched for Freya and her father, but they were no longer in sight. He then began running toward their home that sat on the edge of town. How could she be marrying Rupert? All his life he had thought that one day they would get together and be married. He just hadn't worked up the courage to approach her father. Now, there was no longer any time. He had to state his intention and get him to change his mind. One quick pause here. I had a long sentence. I gotta fix that. Don't you hate it when you can't hit the right key? There you go. Several people hailed him as he ran through town, but so intent on his own inner turmoil was he that he failed to take notice. Finally, their house appeared down the street before him. He could see the front door was just closing. Running up the door, he gave it 3 firm knocks. When it opened, Freya's father stood there before him. "I thought you might show up," he said. "You can't let Freya marry Rupert," he said. "He's a terrible person." "I know you care for her," her father replied, "but I have to think of what's best for Freya. This marriage will assure her of never having to worry about what tomorrow will bring. His family is wealthy and well connected." "But," Riyan stammered. When Freya's father looked questioning at him, he blurted out, "But I love her and want to marry her." Her father's eyes turned sad at that. "I know, son," he said. "I've suspected for a while that you felt this way." Then behind her father, Riyan saw Freya appear from the back room. "Freya," he hollered to her, "you can't marry Rupert." Her father turned around and said, "Get back to your room, Freya. Riyan and I need to have a little talk." She looked with deep sadness to Riyan and then replied, "Yes, father." Then turning around, she went back to her room. Freya's father stepped outside and joined Riyan before shutting the door. "I like you, boy," he said. "I always have, but I can't let that get in the way of my making the best match I can for my daughter." When Riyan tried to break in, he held up his hand and stopped him. "You are a poor shepherd," he continued. "You don't even own the land on which your sheep graze. What life could you give her?" "But I love her," he asserted. "Son, in life, love simply isn't enough." He laid his hand on Ryan's shoulder. "My daughter cares for you. I would hate for her to lose your friendship because of this." Riyan snapped his eyes to his and replied, "She'll never lose it. I just..." "Go home, Riyan," her father said. "Go home and work to get over it." He then turned and opened the door. He paused there a moment before saying, "It might be best for all concerned if you didn't have any contact with my daughter until after the marriage." Without waiting for Ryan's response, he went back into the house and shut the door. In the instant it took for her father to enter the house and shut the door, Riyan saw Freya there in the hallway. Their eyes locked for a moment before the door shut. With the shutting of the door, with the closing of the door. See, the last sentence ended, their eyes locked for a moment before the door shut. And then with the shutting of the door, that's repetition. So with the closing of the door, his heart fell. Sadness overtook him, and it was all he could do to simply keep his emotions under control. Then as he turned, he saw Rupert standing across the street. Anger and hate burned in his heart when he saw the smug smile of satisfaction appear on Rupert's face. Riyan almost crossed the street to wipe it off with a well-placed blow, but then he realized that would solve nothing. Instead, he turned his back on him and walked home. Well, that's it for chapter 2. So we're getting a little... Ryan's got a love interest, marrying his enemy. I know. I'm sure someone will say, "Man, that's a well-used trope." Well, yeah, that's well used because it works. 2 reasons why I did that. One, Morsai Saga really doesn't have a love interest. I mean, the closest thing would be Alea and Jerem, and then Meliana and James. But I never went into love too much. I never explored that aspect of it too much. And I got dinged for that. So someone really tore me apart after book 3, I think it was, because I didn't have anybody. It was all guys. There was no real women. Well, it was Delia, Cassie's dad, of course. No, and then Delia and Tersa. But there really wasn't much in the way of a woman, a love interest, romance. Well, growing up, I never read romances. I never cared about romances. And well, I'm a guy. Yeah, I was one of those guys. Romance now is very important to me, but back then, back when, back in the day, now some. Ooh, you hear that? Storm coming. Okay, now the other reason I was doing this was, I'm sure most of you, if not all, have already read this. So you know Riyan is going to leave home and head out on a quest for the broken key. I needed to give him a reason to do it. It's not just like, oh, let's go have treasure. Riyan's a good guy, and he would stick by his mother and be there for her. But if he thought there was a way that he could win the love of his life and get his mother set up so she wouldn't have to worry about anything for the rest of her life, then yeah, he would leave house, let her endure a little bit of hardship, but ultimately he would win everything if he could pull it off. And I really think that's logical, and I think he would really do that, especially with Chadric and Bart by his side helping him out. Anyway, that's chapter 3. I'm going to upload this tomorrow morning at around my regular time, and I'll let you know if I make it to my girlfriend's house. She lives over in Wichita Falls, which is a 3-hour drive away. We got this major storm on the way. The first 2.5 hours, I should have rain, maybe a little bit of thunderstorms, but the last half hour is going to be major. We're talking a big, fat, angry red sail, just going to be sitting right in the heart of where I'm driving, with tornadoes, strong winds, large hail. Large hail here means like that big. That it can get that big. My son, the year we moved here to help my mom and her husband Ralph, when he got down, that year, my boy pulled a hailstone from our front yard that big. He kept it in my freezer for a long time. I think it's still there, but maybe not. But anyway, yeah. So I really don't want to be in the middle of that. And I'm sure, though she might get irritated, I won't be there. I mean, she's got to understand that, right? I mean, will it improve our relationship if I get sucked up in a tornado and sent to go hang out with the scarecrow? Well, that would be fun, though. Anyway, I think that's it for right now. I've mentioned in other things about my subscribers. I haven't had one for over 2 days now. I haven't had a new one. Still sitting at 136. So we'll see what happens. I got the unsuspecting maids. It's done. Uploaded from when I read it. It's uploaded now. And I did notice that on Amazon, the descriptive, when you go to the Unsuspecting Mages page at Amazon, the wording that I changed on it is now changed. So that has been updated, and it's still free. Yay! Let's keep it free, man. It's got to stay free. But I know of a way now. I researched it, and I can get it free, as long as it's free elsewhere. Authors can go in there and request it free. No one else can, I don't think, but authors can, I believe. Anyway, so let's hope it doesn't go free. I don't want to mess with that. That's been stressing me about Amazon and upgrading it for a long time. I'm rambling again, aren't I? Do I ramble too much? If I do, tell me. If there's anything that you guys would suggest that would make this less burdensome, less monotonous, less boring, or maybe something more exciting, let me know. Do I need to talk slower, talk faster, enunciate better? Well, at least I don't talk like this one guy. Okay, I'm gonna go on another tangent here. When my grandparents used to drive us up to northern Alberta to work on my uncle's farm near Beaver Lodge, Alberta. Next biggest town was Grand Prairie. And there was this old farming couple there, Yarma and June, sweetest people you'd ever meet. I mean, they were the nicest people ever. But Yarma, he talked like this. And I'm not joking, that's exactly how he talked. I never could understand what he was saying. You ever watched Hot Fuzz? Yeah. When he went to see the farmer and he had to bring the one guy to translate for the one guy to translate for the farmer, and they were all talking English. I love that scene. I love that scene. Anyway, yeah. Okay, another Yarman June tale while I'm here. I'm sure I've lost some people already. Well, my brother went there one day to work, helped them out. I didn't go. I wasn't there. Just my brother. Anyway, when it came time for lunch, and this is the heart of the summer, up there summer, maybe 80s, high 70s, still warm. Anyway, when it came to summertime, he sat down at the table, and there was a sheet over the table, and so she pulled back the tablecloth with the food that's been sitting there. How long, he didn't know, but that was his lunch. It wasn't freshly made. It had been sitting there for some time. The milk was slightly curdled from being at room temperature for too long, and that was his lunch. Man, it's just a different time, isn't it? Just a different time. Ugh, that's nasty. That's so bad. Well, to our sensibilities, it is, but man, I'm just going off on tangents, darn it. I got to end this. Y'all have a good day.